Well, hello and welcome again to another fabulous episode of Iron Edge Online. I am your host. My name is Andrew Moore. I'm the COO of Iron Edge Group. I'm here today with Mark. He is responsible for our super awesome service delivery on our support desk and in our knock area. And I'm here with Rebecca, and she is helping us on the sales and business development side. Has been both have been doing managed services for quite a number of years. And so this kind of question comes up on a regular basis about what do you get when you buy managed services? Like, why does it cost what it costs? And how much should you be paying? And why doesn't it appear on your website about what your pricing is and all of these things? So it's kind of an interesting topic to go through. So anyway, so we're going to hop right into it and get started. One of the things we want to talk about is why do managed services providers guard their pricing? So that's an interesting question. Rebecca, what do you think about that? Why do you think people online and why do managed services don't want to put their stuff out there for others?
Well, the dirty little secret is that we essentially all charge the same cost, give or take. Most people follow a per seat method when it comes to charging for managed services. But the big differentiator with managed services is how is the organization structured? There's, traditionally four types of providers out there. You've got the trunk slammers, and trunk slammers are really like the 2 to 4 people organizations that have no process. They're cloud-based, so you'll run into them. They'll say, yeah, we can put you in a cloud service. We can put you on Office 365. We can handle the cloud applications. But what they really lack is the experience to handle organizations. So whether it's their service team doesn't know how to mitigate risks that may pop up. Like right now, we've got Log4j going on, which is a huge vulnerability that affects everybody. And they lack the experience to tackle those problems and mitigate those type of risks. The next type of managed service provider you'll come across is the value MSP. They're typically 8 to 15 people. Their pricing model seems great because you either have break fix or you have an hourly model, so on an as needed basis. But there's no documentation of your environment. There's no ability for them to track, constant and persistent problems within your environment. And so that particular model doesn't necessarily work, especially when it comes to larger organizations. And again, going back to, some of the vulnerabilities, we lack checks and balances. So you may have this technician over here working on one thing, another technician over here working on another, and there's no continuity within that. The third one that we have is going to be what we call the bolt-on MSPs. These are sales-driven organizations. They are what you would see like a printer vendor. That's the most common one that I've come across. And you have a huge print organization that leases and maintains printers, and then they have the managed service component. And so they're really a sales-driven organization. And the problem that we run into when we come across that is that there's no main person that you can contact. They don't consult you technology-wise. They don't understand things like security or business continuity, how outages impact your business. And so they take a step back from being that strategic partner that you need as a business. And it becomes more of a sales-driven platform and plan instead of being a business partner with you. And then the fourth category is what we call the mature managed service provider. Those are typically organizations that are 20 to 25 people or more. They have, over 10 years experience in managed services. They are, their core business is service. It's service and business consulting when it comes to technology. Everybody provides, each one of these categories, we all provide IT and we all do at least a decent job. Otherwise you take your business elsewhere. But the thing that sets apart mature organizations compared to immature organizations or managed service providers is how we help you technology plan. And so there's different categories and different value with the type of provider that you choose. And we hope you choose a managed mature organization. So
well, you can you can choose, right? Like, I think it's interesting when you talk about that there are these different levels that you have. And I know that every managed, well, not every, but most managed services providers have gone through some sort of evolution, right? Most companies don't start out like they pop out with 25 employees and a bunch of, highly developed processes, right? There are a few stages that companies have to go through. And I think it's important to know when you're looking for a managed services provider and why their pricing isn't always published, is that each one of these organizations, these types of organizations, may not have the maturity to actually identify what their pricing models look like, right? Like if they're very small, they may not understand what their gross profitability needs to be in order to maintain their clients and to keep skilled labor on their staff, right? In order to support the services that they're selling to their market. And I think it's important for people to remember that some of these smaller organizations, they don't have a lot of the checks and balances in place. And so their pricing might be competitively far less, but there's a risk inherent with that, right? And they always say you get what you pay for. Now, I'm not an advocate of overpaying, right? I think that's something everybody needs to be aware of. But to your point, Rebecca, I think in the market, we see that most organizations, most more mature service organizations in technology have kind of a range, right? And that range is for sometimes it's per person, sometimes it's per computer, sometimes it's per physical location. So those things come together, and managed service providers often don't kind of publish those rates because they're not always providing the same types of service to each one of the clients that they're working with. So they could be a base level type of service without security on it. They could be a smaller organization and not have the overhead, so their pricing is a little different and kind of lower. And so a lot of people kind of keep that to themselves, and they don't really bring it forward until they wind up engaging with the client. And for some of the less mature organizations, they're not going to do a bunch of due diligence up front in order to understand what the risk is to them as an organization and where they should provide some guidance to the client. Some of those less mature organizations are simply looking to make a sale, which for a small business, if you're in a kind of a tight budget for your IT services, they may be a good fit to get you, by. We typically see that organizations move to us and more mature MSPs when they hit 20, 25 people. And then they kind of outgrow that provider that kind of got them closer to where they needed to be. We're kind of in budget as they grew as a company. But that's all really good stuff. And Mark, we see this sometimes when we take over from another organization, right? Like from other managed services providers, like just
Absolutely.
kind of their level of maturity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can usually tell pretty quickly. And, like you said before, like nothing against those guys. Everybody's trying to make a living and nobody's doing anything, I guess, shady, I guess is the best way to put it. Like they're all trying to solve a problem, right? But when we take somebody over, we'll see things like, an end user grade antivirus that's on their systems, like you see the AVGs and the Pandas of the world, those are some little things. Or we'll, when we go to take over a client, we'll see that they have home use firewalls and routers. Those are cheaper pieces of equipment, and it makes sense at a time to purchase some of those things for both, the smaller organization and the smaller client organization. But at some point, you do have to understand that, cheap equipment at times can just be that. And, you've got to be prepared for that. And the feature richness and a lot of stuff that the more mature organizations are providing you are, they're from a security landscape, from an access control landscape, from a lot of different, from a reporting and monitoring, like a lot of those things are things that the more mature organization has that you're just not going to get from the smaller spots.
And all of the things that you just mentioned kind of affect what our pricing is, right?
Exactly.
So from a pricing perspective, interestingly, we have a post up on the blog that I wrote, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. And the going rate for managed services in 2019, 2020 was probably around $125 to $150 per person per month. And that includes a lot of things, right? That includes your backups, that includes some antivirus software, some additional security software. It includes account management hours. It includes all you can eat support desk. It includes a lot of that stuff. But what happened during 2020, as everybody rapidly adopted cloud technologies, is we found that IT services, in order to provide a secure environment to our clients, the landscape had changed. And so a lot of managed services providers started kind of moving into what they call almost like a technology services provider stack, where security and other cloud services were now integrated directly into the managed support solution. And that caused an increase in pricing for a couple of different reasons. One is the pricing went up because of the level of expertise and human oversight that is required in providing a more secure solution. And the other is the tools that are required in order to provide that security and cloud integration know-how. So organizations had to start finding ways to move their clients up stack into these more mature solutions, specifically around security, and the pricing has changed. So, right now we're looking at anywhere between $150 and $200 per person per month for what we would call, I'm not going to call it a baseline package, but it's the type of package that we feel comfortable with from our organization, that we're going to be able to maintain our SLAs. We're going to be able to provide a secure experience for our clients and keep the folks on our support team paid adequately and certified and moving in the right direction in order to create some continuity for our clients. If you get into even more advanced security solutions, you could be looking at anywhere between $250 or more per person per month, because you're integrating things like SIM, threat hunting, managed intrusion detection solutions, sandboxing, right? There's like all sorts of different add-ons that you can start bolting into solutions, and they get exponentially more expensive, primarily around the fact that you have to have a lot more human interaction with some of those, right? Like people looking at the logs, people creating escalation alerts and stuff, removing false positives. So when you're looking for a provider, the going rate for IT services is all in: backups, antivirus, support desk, all those things. You're going to have an all-in kind of price. Now they could charge you by person and then like line item everything else. They could charge you by workstation and line item everything else. They could charge you for phones and start doing add-ons for other things. When it all boils down to it, and you take your bill minus the cost of your, let's say, online productivity licensing like Office 365, most of you are going to see a price anywhere between, depending on what maturity of your MSP, between $100 and $200 per person per month is about where you're going to be. And most organizations are going to land in that $150 to $200 if they're working with a more mature MSP that's providing a significant amount of security and consulting services on top of their standard help desk support. And so I think it's important to circle back to what Rebecca talked about regarding how that works, because a lot of organizations we see in the sales process will have them come back to us, and we're about to hit this here in a second, when they talk about apples to apples. They'll say, well, you guys are 30% more expensive than your competitor in the sales cycle, right? And so one of the questions that we have, right, is obviously, who is our competitor, if they feel comfortable sharing that. And let's say that it happens to be, we'll use an example, a major cloud-based phone services provider that within the last 5 years decided that, well, since we're selling phones, we should probably sell IT services. Fair enough, right? always up for having a conversation with the client and competing on service and price. I have no problem with that. Well, what it turns out is that they're significantly less expensive on paper because all of the things that we're offering that are included in our package are not on their statement of work. And so what will wind up happening is over the course of the relationship, the client will be upsold into these solutions. And at some point within the first 3 to 6 months, they're probably going to wind up paying at or more than what we would offer in our solution in a less proactive way. So what we like to do is make sure that we sit down with the client, go over those things with them, and help them to understand what it is that we provide as part of our service so that that dollar figure makes sense to them. And that just comes from having been a managed services provider for the entire duration of this organization's existence, right? Most organizations who are more mature that are a managed IT provider, they're going to have more of an all-in solution and a way of providing these things so that it's easy to invoice you. Like simple, I guess is the better way of putting it. Simple to invoice. It is accurate when you get your invoice. Everything is included. Everything is easy to understand as far as like what products are a part of that bundle. And it's not a series of add-ons. And I think it's really important to understand that the add-ons, when you start talking about comparing apples to apples, really make a difference. And so, Mark has the opportunity of being able to actually support these tools, right, whenever they come through. And so when we look at apples to apples, Mark, why don't we talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we offer that or a more mature organization offers that people should be looking for when they're out shopping for managed IT services and what that price difference might look like?
For sure. So a few things are going to be your tool set for one, like obviously remote management, things like that. Are they using a tool set that is purpose built for what we're doing, or is it something like a team viewer or, something that's maybe not quite driven towards the MSP space? That'll be the first one. Antivirus we talked about, is it a next gen product versus, a home use product?
What's the difference between those? Like when you talk about next gen antivirus and like kind of more of your entry level business prosumer, as they call it, like professional consumer, like kind of what do you see there in those sets between what antivirus we believe people should be using versus what some of the older or less advanced antiviruses that are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without getting too technical and putting everybody to sleep, there are a few things that we can think of right off the bat. And first, how those definitions are updated. Like those are going to be some things that how frequently those definitions are updated. Advanced monitoring and alerting solutions. Is there a group of really smart people in the background that are looking at these threats and evaluating them in real time, or is it a couple of guys in a basement? I was one of those guys a long time ago, but are there a couple of guys in a basement coming up with virus definitions, a day after? We talked about log4j. It's kind of a timestamp on where we are right now. And there are a lot of antivirus products out there that I actually had a call with one, not one of ours, but that basically said, we think we're okay, and where you get, with the next gen AV, they're like, yep, we've already got everything blocklisted. We know exactly where the exploits are. We know what's going on. And we know how to protect you against it. After AV, there's zero trust, and zero trust is a really big deal. And you're not going to hear that about that product and in the smaller organizations, but understanding what is zero trust. Zero trust is a system that kind of operates outside of antivirus that is going to monitor traffic in your environment. And what it's designed to do is look at those, quote unquote, safe applications and make sure that they're not doing anything that they're not supposed to be doing. So essentially, if you can imagine a scenario where you're looking in Microsoft Word and you're just writing out a document, and then something happens and Microsoft Word tries to execute a command or put a payload, which could be a file that could potentially impact your network. This is a big deal, and zero trust will protect you against that. Outside of that, there's also business continuity, which, you've got your backup products, apples to apples. You hear, we see this a lot where you get clients or potential clients really, they're like, we've got backups covered. And you find out that there's no offsite replication. There's no encryption at rest in the cloud, or an encryption at rest is your data protected when it's not doing anything? But you'll see that type of stuff. Right? Air gapped. Exactly.
Like having it segmented from the rest of your data, so that if your data are compromised, that the backups aren't compromised. Like, it's an important thing to consider when looking at a backup solution as well.
Absolutely. And then, the integrations into a tool set, that if something does go wrong, how quickly are your technicians able to get after it and see what's up? We've, all heard the horror stories of somebody that's, we've got backups, and then something happens and they haven't had a good backup in 3 months, 6 months. And why? Either alerting was set up incorrectly, or there's no real alerting offered,
or nobody's doing test restores, right? Like, I mean, that costs more money to have people and systems that do that, right?
Absolutely. There's individuals in the background, at least, for us, there's individuals in the background that are looking anywhere from monthly to quarterly to yearly, depending on the needs of the client, and then taking those needs of the client, whether it's due to some compliancy, or it's just internal rules that they've set up for themselves, or regulations, but regardless, having a body that is actually looking at these things and not only relying on the quote unquote robots to do it for you. That's a big distinction, I think. And then go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, right. So sorry to interrupt, but something that we see a lot, like Rebecca and I talk about it in the process of educating our prospects on, why to work with us. These tools are great. Mm-hmm. They're awesome. We love them, right? Everybody says people's tools, processes, right? Like it's in every sales proposal that everybody puts together. But I think that when you're talking about apples to apples, there's one other thing that comes with the tools that we should talk about briefly, which is how they're configured, how secure they are, right? Who's responsible for them? All that comes with a cost, right? Like, your team isn't using defaults, right? We have, so there's like multi-factor on data. Like, I mean, there's information that's being stored for the client that is proprietary, that happens to be a part of their environment that we need to be protecting as a managed services company, right? Can you talk a little bit about like what you see whenever you're beginning to interact with other companies, or kind of what we do differently in regards to our configuration of the tools and the time that we spend on maintaining them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's another really good point, is you're going to see buzzwords, among multiple, many MSPs, whether it's 2 people or, 50 people. And those words are like ConnectWise or Autodesk or ServiceNow or, Kaseya. Like, these products are available for everyone, and they all come, with, stock, there's minimal configuration. But making the product secure through workflows on the back end, configurations on the back end, regular audits of access on those products, making sure that integrations are using the least amount of permissions. Let's say that your very important piece of software has to talk to another very important piece of software, right? Ensuring that other piece of software can only access what it's supposed to often gets overlooked, and that's one of those things that you really do have to focus on. You brought up MFA. MFA is critical and a requirement for us, and it's something that's regularly checked. Go ahead, Andrew. It looked like you were going to say something.
No, I was drinking a Topo Chico and I burped.
Banana.
Yeah, leave it in. That's fantastic. Sorry.
No, all good. So, and then not only that, but we're not talking about just 1 or 2 products. A mature ISP or MSP is not going to be working with 1 or 2 products. We're talking in the dozens, and having a staff of people that are constantly auditing those products and making sure that exploits that are out in the wild are not impacting those products, having regular conversations with the vendors and account managers for those products, not just being, trusting the thing to do what it does.
Are we practicing what we're preaching?
Yeah, Andrew has a great way of putting it. Are we eating our own dog food? You know,
Right.
and it's true. You know, like if we're going to tell our clients, you know, MFA is the most important thing you can be doing in Office 365, or, you know, multi-factor authentication, antivirus, next-gen antivirus. Well, you know, we're doing those things too. You know, not only that, but a lot of times we are our own petri dish in a lot of cases. Like we're testing this stuff to make sure that it's doing what it promises to do for our clients. And, you know, and that's a, you know, it's a full-time job.
Yeah, the apples to apple things is really important because there's no, I mean, I very rarely find that we walk into a competitive sales situation where I look at the, you know, we discuss the differences in our service delivery and our tools, and it truly is just exactly the same. There are very strong similarities for most mature organizations. And I don't want anyone to think that we're out here disparaging people bootstrapping their way up into managed services, right? There are a lot of very competent technology professionals that are getting their consultancies off the ground. But when you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, you may not have the resources to be able to provide the service at the level of a, you know, 20 to 50 or 100 person organization, and be able to effectively charge for those services and maintain those services. Now, as Mark mentioned, there are a lot of organizations out there that are trying to empower some of these smaller managed services companies by providing them the ability to offload security services to a third party, offload ticketing to a third party, offload you know, configuration of their systems and environments for the project stuff they do. They can do third-party project delivery, right? And so you can kind of like, some managed services providers almost become a broker for all of these other third-party services. And again, it comes back to, like, as a business owner, what you're looking for from your relationship with your IT services provider. Are they local, right? Are they providing service in a way where they're able to control the deliverable? You know, how quickly does it take to affect change? Are they able to really understand your business and verticalize things based on what it is that you do in your industry? Are they able to take those services and translate them in a way that allows you to be secure, but also agile, right? So that you can get things done as an organization if your position changes as a business. So all of those things, coupled with some of the ancillary services outside of the day-to-day things in the contract, right? Rebecca and I talk about this often when we go out to meet with a client. Our account management team, right? Being able to be consultative and not out just selling things to clients, right? So we run into that often, where we've got some account management that we see with our competitors, where their job is just product penetration and making sure that those folks are going to renew their contract at the end of each year, right? Our job is to make sure that you're consulted properly and that your business technology meets the needs of your organization, and to be able to communicate with you on how a control or a process would be a better fit for something than trying to implement a piece of technology. And we see that quite often, where we have folks come to us and they're like, we were sold this stack of equipment. And we're like, yeah, you could have fixed that if you just had this one person check a box over here in this form, right? We could have circumvented all of that. And they're like, oh my God. Like, so those are the kind of things that you have to look at, right? So you've got this, you know, component of strategy, and who's going to be providing that strategy to the clients, and making sure that it's scalable within the organization, that it's not just the owner, right, of the company doing that, or one person. Like, you've got multiple people that can provide that support. And then other areas, like, how dedicated is their security group? Do they have somebody that's focused internally on their own security and is driving their security initiatives forward, or is it folded into another department? Are the people on the service desk also the people that are doing the projects? Because if that's the case, those people may not be available to answer the phone if they're also out there running down projects. Are the folks that you work with in order to purchase items, right? Do they have a dedicated purchasing team that is available to help to run down things, as the supply chain right now is just weird, right? To make sure that they're dedicated on trying to get you the best deal in the quickest amount of time. So these are all things that kind of bolt on to a service delivery model that might change the way that the pricing looks? And so those are all questions that should be asked. And some of them may not matter to you as an organization. And so for those that don't matter, you can start moving your price point up and down. For those that the checkboxes are all requirements, then you're going to get an idea that you're probably going to be closer to that, again, that $150 to $200 per person per month support solution. So that's kind of the way that we look at it, the way that we want our prospects to understand it, because the better educated folks are, the easier it is for us to tell our story and for them to get the type of service and support they need. And I love it when our clients keep us honest, right? Our prospects, where they come in and they're, they're like, well, this is what we're doing here, and this is how much this is going to cost, and this is what these folks are offering. And again, we're happy to have a conversation about a competitive price point. But it helps to educate folks on what it takes to deliver this service at the level that most mature organizations do. Did I forget anything, Mark? Is there anything that we were going to touch on that didn't come out?
The only thing I can that maybe we touched on, but is the MSP's internal processes and controls. Having self audits, making sure that there are policies in place that are documented, that your team or that your MSP can go to in the event of a security breach or in the event of an audit, or there are so many different things, data restoration, or even service delivery, having all of that thought out and documented and followed provides, with the more mature MSPs, you're going to see a consistency in service, and you're going to see, we'll say, more confidence in service. Obviously when you have some of that, the incident response and change management procedures and things like that, more controlled and less risky, changes to environments come after that. There's a lot of times where you'll see those smaller shops, and again, nothing wrong with them, they just don't know yet. But they'll make a change and not fully understand the impact. That's what a wealth of experience.
I'm going to go reboot the server real quick. Tell everybody to log out.
Exactly.
That's my favorite. It's like 2:00 on a Tuesday. You're like, oh, okay, let's do that.
What could go wrong? And I'm not going to lie, when I was younger, I've done those things before, but I mean, you learn those lessons, right? And I think that's the big thing. With
servers when you were younger?
What's that?
They had servers when you were younger? They were like mainframes?
No, you just
like those big wheels.
Abacus. Yeah. You just that was pretty much it. You just shook the abacus and moved on.
Oh my God.
But yeah, no, I mean, check for those documented processes, ask for them. Like if people want to know what your incident response process is, that's a fair request, I think.
Yeah. And Rebecca, and when we go out and meet with clients and talk to them about things, kind of, and I'm putting you on the spot here on this one, because I know we didn't really talk about this prior, but like, what are some of the complaints that you hear when you talk to prospects where they're like looking to make a change? Like, what are their primary concerns typically? And kind of your thoughts on how that translates to what we talked about today, and how most mature organizations will be able to help.
So one of the biggest things that I hear, across the board when it comes to prospects is service delivery. Recently had a prospect, and we're in the process of quoting managed services, and they were with a smaller provider. And it wasn't that the smaller provider wasn't doing a good job as far as the problems that they were solving. The issue was that they just didn't have time to address the tickets that were coming in an appropriate manner. And so what we typically see is, it's not necessarily a lack of skill or a lack of knowledge when it comes to resolving the tickets. It's a lack of time. And so another common theme that I've heard across the board is security. And I know that's a hot button issue, but with the climate that we're in, as far as cybersecurity goes, it's a significant concern. And so we're hearing clients going back to their managed service providers and saying, hey, if something were to happen to your environment, how would you protect me as the client? And we, mature organizations typically have a better process in place on how they're going to respond to those incidents. And I can even defer to Mark for that incident response and what that should and traditionally looks like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, the incident response plan starts with who's doing what, and that's an important distinction, like having roles, who's communicating to the client, who's communicating to all clients, who's actually addressing the security aspect of it, who's going to the CISA teleconferences that they're having for breach, availability or information, and having those roles set up and to where when something does happen, it's not everyone scrambling saying, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? It's immediately, okay, John, you're here, you're doing this, you're doing that, and everyone breaks. And we have a constant stream of communication so that nothing's missed, and then you're coming back around and making sure, going through your once over after, the breach has been mitigated, and then having a response of, here's what happened, here's why it happened, here's what we can do, here's what you should look out for. It's cohesive response, it's educated troubleshooting and, configuration changes, making sure that everyone understands the goal and that everybody's updated at the same time. And really, when you're talking about, ransomware, or you're talking about some breach that's happening, those 30 minutes or, 2 hours where everybody's just trying to figure out what's going on from a communication perspective, like that's precious time, and that's an important thing to already have in your tool belt. And yeah.
I think that I think it's important just for everyone to understand that there are costs associated with providing a more mature level of service, and giving the potential clients the ability to understand what those processes are and what those costs equate to, right? What the fees equate to, is important in helping them make better decisions. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to put this webisode together, was to help educate folks on how to make better decisions when they're out, talking to managed services providers, and to really understand what it takes to deliver the support that we think our clients deserve. So, was there anything else, Mark, that we wanted to touch on?
I think we got most of it. I think people will know the right questions to ask.
Rebecca, anything you wanted to bring up that we didn't manage to get to?
I think we hit all our key notes.
Excellent. Well, before my dogs freak out and start barking because they're hungry, we will call it a day. So I appreciate my special guests, Mark and Rebecca, for being here today and helping us to understand a little bit about why it costs money to provide high quality service to people. I know it sounds weird to say that, but it's true. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.